Hi, I'm Brian Horn with Lawn and Landscape Magazine. Thanks for joining us for this webinar, Bring on 2022 Landscaping Business Trends and Strategies for the Year. A few things before I turn it over to the host, GoMaterials. If you have a question, type it into the Zoom Q&A box. I will field those. And if there is time at the end, we'll shoot those out to the panelists for some answers. Also, we'll be sending a recording of this webinar to all registrants probably early next week, so keep an eye out for that. A little bit about the webinar today. GoMaterials recently published the 2022 Landscaping Business Trends Report. The report covered some of the challenges and opportunities that green industry professionals will likely face this year. Topics include the rise in demand for landscaping services, labor, plant and driver shortages, and increasing material costs. Today's webinar will be focused on deep diving into these trends with our panelists. We expect to have a meaningful discussion that can hopefully help our audience better prepare for the year to come. Moderating the session will be Shireen, one of the co-founders of GoMaterials. Shireen, take it away.
Thanks, Brian. Welcome everyone to the Bring On 2022 webinar. We're happy to have you all with us here today. I want to kick things off by allowing our panelists to each introduce themselves. So I'll pass it off to Mike. You can go ahead and introduce yourself and then pass it on to the next panelist.
Awesome. Thank you, Shireen. So Mike here from GoMaterials, co-founded the business back in 2017 with the mission to simplify the procurement process. Prior to GoMaterials, I actually worked in CPG, so consumer packaged goods at PepsiCo for many, many years in many different roles. Extremely passionate about people, whether it be our customers, suppliers, or our GoMaterials team. And very excited to be here today among these other awesome panelists. I'll pass it over to Tom.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Barry, and I'm the president of the maintenance division at Rupert Landscape. Rupert's a commercial landscape maintenance and construction company headquartered in Maryland, and we operate 30 branch locations, primarily spread throughout the Mid-Atlantic. The company, in one form or another, has been in business for nearly 50 years now, and I've had the privilege of working with the team for the past 8 years or so. I'd just like to thank the audience for making time to come listen to us, and I'm looking forward to the discussion with the panel. With that, I'll pass it on to Brian.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. I am Brian Moores. I am the VP of Client Experience at Aspire Software. Aspire has been around since 2013. I have been with the company since day one, and prior to that, I was in the landscape space for almost 35 years. So have been in everyone's seat at one point or another, running string trimmers, mowers, operating businesses, and now for the last close to 20 years now in the software side of things. So I appreciate being here with GoMaterials and the panel here today, and look forward to help answering any questions anyone has. Rick, it's all yours.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me, Shireen. I'm pleased to be here. I'm Rick Stiles. I'm the Southwest Director of Landscape Sales for Verde Growers. Growers is a wholesale nursery operating on 6,000 acres and 14 farms in 4 states, Florida, Texas, California, and Oregon, which gives us the capabilities of shipping nationwide and in parts of Canada. And a fun fact I like is at the end of each year, we typically produce 33 million plants. So that's where we stand today.
Amazing. Thank you. So just to give the audience an idea for the format of today, the first half of the webinar will be a Q&A with the panelists tied to some of the trends that we're seeing for 2022. And then we're going to make sure to leave a decent amount of time for Q&A directly from the audience. So if anyone does have questions, put them in the chat, and then we'll get to those at the end of the session. With that, we're going to dive right in, and I'd like to start the conversation on the topic of shortages. So the industry has been facing labor shortages for quite some time now. It's nothing new, but product shortages and truck driver shortages seem to be 2 trends that are gaining a lot more ground recently. So my first question goes out to Mike. Seeing that GoMaterials published a plant shortage report last year, can you speak to us briefly about the key causes of the plant shortages and then how it's been impacting the industry?
Yeah, absolutely, Shireen. So in reality, this isn't something that started 2 years ago. This dates back to 2008 in the recession, where over 50% of nurseries unfortunately closed their doors, right? And obviously since that time, the economy has recovered, but there has been way less nurseries in production over the past 14 years. And then in 2020, COVID hit and threw everything out of proportion, right? Plug manufacturers closing, visa suspensions, you name it. And on top of that, you have weather, you know, I mean, the Texas freeze and weather that's really come into play. There's just really, you know what I mean, caused major stress on the supply side of the equation. And then when you flip it over to the demand side, you have an industry that is growing consistently, doing well, and then COVID for the demand side actually increases demand, right? Interest rates are low, people are staying home, investing in their property. So you can see how there's this major imbalance that happened on the supply and demand side, where really that caused the plant shortages, right? And this took on a whole new meaning over the past 12 to 18 months.
Okay, and any thoughts on the overall impact for the industry?
Total mayhem. It has totally screwed everything up, right? And the easiest way to explain that really is material is harder to find. It's coming from way further. And when it comes from way further, that means transportation costs are going up through the roof. Specs and substitutes are the norm, right? And when you add those three things up together, the result is increase in pricing, right? An increase in price. So it really is, I don't want to call it the perfect storm because it's not nowhere near perfect, but I would call it the imperfect storm of shortages.
I think you make a good point, Mike, in you know, in that this isn't all about COVID, right? Everyone wants to blame COVID for everything these days, right? And it's really not, right? We've seen this going on for, you know, like you said, dating back to 2008. I was at a landscape business back then, and we actually shifted the way we did some of our work as a result, right? Because we had to move we moved crews over doing more maintenance rather than doing install stuff. And so, you know, you mentioned weather always playing a factor into things. And so I think it's important that people remember that there's other variables out there that are playing into this cost increase and these situations that are occurring in our world today.
I think often too, Brian, we always try to pinpoint it to be one with the one cause, but in reality, like many things in business and in life, it's the sum of many different things, right? So I think
So
that
true.
Yeah.
So Rick, obviously as the only, you know, nursery representative on the panel, I'm very curious about your thoughts on the plant and labor shortages. How have nurseries been impacted? And then what can landscape businesses expect as a result?
Well, actually, Mike, you had a pretty good overview there. As far as demand, it's strong. It's strong in construction and it's strong in the retail nursery side of things. So that's keeping the flow going. As far as supply, there are supply chain issues. We produce most of our own liners and shifting stock. But if an item is tissue cultured or it's patented and we don't have production rights, bare root trees, that type of thing, that there's been some real issues in supply, which really affects us on the other end. So we're doing best to keep up. We have historical data. We believe we know what we need. Labor on the two sides, trucking, it's pretty brutal. I mean, examples being, we're talking about Texas, we were shipping, I call them common carriers or contract drivers. Last year, we could get a truck to pull our material to Texas for about $3,000. Then it went up to $5,000 and then $8,000 and in some cases $10,000. And I mean, you start to amortize, spread that across the material on the truck, it definitely makes a difference.
Wow.
As far as labor in California, I mean, the minimum wage is $15 an hour. Really still isn't enough to live on. But nobody wants to work. Nursery business is hard work and it's tedious. The farms aren't necessarily convenient to where people live. And $15 an hour isn't having people beat our door down. I won't ramble on for too long, but Amazon kind of set the bar last year by hiring thousands and thousands of workers at $18 an hour plus weekly and monthly incentives for showing up all week. So that's what we're dealing with, you know, and we will deal with it. We're not passing it all along. We have to remain competitive. But right now, as you had said, it's just mayhem. We're containing our costs on the back end the best that we can so we don't have to pass them all along to our customers. But as of right now, it is a little bit of this. We'll know more in 3 months, I think.
Great, and I'm happy you mentioned kind of the truck driver shortages and the difficulties with transport, because my next question is actually tied to that. So one of the stats that we had in our 2022 report was that there's a shortage of about 80,000 truck drivers in the US at the moment. And so Tom, my next question was for you. Have you experienced any challenges with regards to the truck driver shortage? Obviously fuel prices going up. How have you adapted and worked around this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, kind of two parts to that question. One, most of our drivers do not require a CDL license. So it's fortunate for us in that respect, because I think it's far more competitive to get CDL drivers. That being said, labor is our biggest input, and we're feeling shortages there. We have, as long as I've been in the business, and it's getting accentuated now more than the past year. So we're looking for good people at every level, including our crew leaders who are driving our trucks. And I think that the thing that we are being vigilant about is not reducing our standards there. We're putting multiple people's lives within the truck in the hands of that driver, as well as everyone on the road around them. And really, an accident can have a huge impact, not only on people's lives, but on our P&L. One incident can basically erode the profit of a truck for the life of that truck. So making sure that as labor gets tight, we're not lowering the standards. And the way we found best, pretty much with every position, including driver, is to really focus on promoting from within. If we can get people as soon as possible, as early on, bring them into the organization, indoctrinate them into the culture, and begin training them and providing them opportunities to move up, that usually works out the best.
Perfect. Does anyone else have any thoughts on the truck driver shortages or, fuel prices, how that's tying into logistics? Before we move on to the next topic. Good. So moving on. Sorry about that. Was someone good? So moving on, the next trend I would like to explore is that of increasing costs for the industry. And we've already kind of touched upon that already. So there's an estimated increase in the nursery input costs of about 13% this year versus pre-pandemic levels. So Rick, I'm gonna start with you here. Have you started seeing this at Verde? It sounds like yes, based off your previous question, but based off my previous question, but what will then really be the impact? Are there going to be price increases? What percentage should landscaping businesses start preparing for? What are your thoughts there?
Well, absolutely. And I'm sure at this point, it's at least 13%, could be higher. Some examples would be urea-based nitrogen component and fertilizer. We contract, we have some pretty heavy duty purchasing power, and we contract nationally and regionally to get the best prices we negotiate. Our price went up to 48% over last year. And that's one component. Basically, all of the materials are going up. So yeah, plant prices have to go up because it's not sustainable. Like I said, and I'm being honest, we're holding back prices as much as we can. Again, we have to be competitive, and we care about our customers. We have partnerships with our customers, correct? And I think, was it you that was joking, or somebody said, hey, you signed a contract or you put out an estimate, you signed the contract, turn around, your materials went up 15%. That's funny, but it's not funny. And so we all have to work together. My advice would be to plan further ahead, look for commitments, source your materials the best you can, lock them in, even to the point of maybe even allowing more time for material to be delivered. But what we're doing on our end is negotiating to keep our costs down and being more and more and more efficient. That's the only way in the nursery business, besides raising prices, that you can remain profitable, is by keeping your costs down. So we're really looking into automation and the production side of it and other savings. But yeah, costs are going up. You're all seeing that.
Brian and Mike, so because Aspire and GoMaterials cater to landscape businesses across the US, I imagine that you're in constant communication with, landscape professionals. I'm curious, based off the feedback you've been receiving, what's been kind of the word amongst your customers, and how are they coping, or any strategies that they've had put in place to deal with these cost increases? We can start with Brian.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have talked about here this morning about creativity. Rick has talked about it, Tom has talked about it, right? You need to be a little bit creative in how you're dealing with those cost things, efficiencies, right? Trying to find efficiencies at your company. Rick, I think everyone appreciates the fact that you're not passing all of the costs along to, right? You got to absorb some of those costs because you have to be competitive, right, in nature. And that's the same with any landscape business, right? We can't just go and raise our prices and expect that we're going to be the guy they're going to purchase from, because we're likely to price ourselves right out of work in our area. And so we need to find other ways. And Tom mentioned it with trucking, right? His not requiring CDL drivers and having maybe smaller vehicles. We did that a number of years back, where we went to smaller vehicles and didn't require CDLs. And so we could go pick up materials pretty easily on our own, right? And reduce some of our trucking costs. And again, those are some of the things that people can do. Efficiencies in the organization. I mentioned earlier, I talked to some companies late last year that were shifting their book of work, right? They were performing more maintenance work and other type of enhancement work based upon the materials they could get, right? The materials that were available to them. And so sometimes you need to look at, what's my book of work? Where do I need to shift? Maybe it is too expensive for me to stay in this, continue to do this type of work, at least today, right? We want to move back to that at some point, but looking at how your business is operating, the things you're doing, the costs it's requiring. And that's why data is so important. I know I'm here as kind of the technology person. That's why data is so important, right? Because I can get that information out of the system, analyze that information, and then make really key strategic decisions on how I need to operate and run my business. But without that data, right, I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing at what, moves I should make next. And so that's why it's important to tie kind of this technology portion into this, because, right, it helps you with creating those efficiencies, understanding how to be creative and strategic at your company.
Yeah, and it's hard because we know the landscape contractors and our nurseries, no one has a crystal ball, right? No one can predict what's coming at 100% accuracy. And if you can, please let me know, because we need to start a new business together. But from a GoMaterials standpoint, I can really speak to the material piece and the transportation piece, and it has been a huge struggle, and especially for these larger commercial projects, that are getting bid on or budgeted and planned for years in advance, right? Like, how is someone able to predict what has happened and bake that cost increase into their initial plan? And now today they're executing those projects, and all these pressures are putting enormous amounts of pressures on their profitability for these jobs, but they still want to complete them on time. So it is exactly what Brian was saying. It comes down to data, and how can we as an industry support them in being able to do this more accurately, or as accurately as possible.
I think just to add, from our side, we spend a lot of time talking about how do we provide value to our customers, and value, thinking of good quality service at a competitive price. And we're not a high margin business, and defending our margins is important for us to be able to continue doing that. And how we tackle providing value and defending our margin is really managing costs, like Brian was talking about and everyone's been talking about. Rick was talking about really scrutinizing your spending, and then the other side of it is raising price. Our costs are going up across the board. We have to pass some component of that through to our customers, and it's been many years where I feel like it's been very difficult to pass price, and we've been forced to get more and more efficient versus being able to raise price. I feel like now more than ever is the right time to be pushing price. But as always, having to get more efficient and make smart decisions. And I think that any business challenge, this year is bringing new challenges. The pandemic's bringing new challenges, but it forces you to think about your business. How can you deliver service, deliver your product at a more competitive rate, a more efficient manner, and you optimize that as much as you can, and you pass through cost, and you try to defend your margin all along the way.
Right, and I think too, we're no exception to this happening. It's happening across the board, right? Like, this is not just the green industry or the landscape construction business. This is happening in every single industry. You know, look at price of grocery for consumers, right? Just in the past few months, it's insane what has happened, right? So we're definitely no exception to that. So I totally agree with you, Tom.
Tom, I wanted to touch on some of what you were saying. So what is that balance between protecting your own profitability, meaning passing off all the costs to your end customer, versus remaining competitive? Like, is there a magic number, or is there a strategy of knowing, okay, well, how much of this am I going to pass off, and how much of it is going to be me taking the hit?
Yeah, it's a balance. I mean, the market dictates to some degree what customers are willing to pay, and in order for us to remain competitive, we've got a lot of great competitors within the industry that are all looking for how can they deliver high quality service at a competitive price. And if they figure out a more efficient way than us to do it and offer the customer the same quality for a lower price, then they've earned that work rightfully. So it is really trying to figure out any opportunity for us to become more efficient in how we deliver what we're doing. And then when we can't push that any further, we really have to make sure we're getting the price that is warranted for what we're doing. And I think that, not underselling the service that we're providing is important. And I think that that's a real shift in mentality on that front. I mean, I think a lot of it's the same as it's always been, but making sure that in an environment where labor for us is the biggest input, and labor's tight, whether you're running restaurants or hotels or anything that's labor intensive, it's hard to get labor. It's hard to get a good team that's willing to work. I think Rick was saying, it's hard work, and getting folks that are willing to come out and do it. If you've built that team, don't undercut the price of the work that they're producing. You got to find customers that care about the way their landscape looks. They want to invest in it, not asking them to overpay, but asking them to pay a fair rate for the work that's there. And I think it's important to hold the line on that pricing.
I think, Tom, you mentioned too, margins, understanding your margins, knowing what they can be, what maybe they can dip down to, right? So that, kind of, we can go to an X margin before I need to increase my costs or my pricing to my clients, right? And really then, looking at I don't want to get too financially down some rabbit hole, but, understanding your whole budget and making adjustments, right? Maybe there's certain things in that whole financial outlook that you can say, well, we're going to have to skip this or this year, right? Because A, we want to keep all of our employees. B, we have to pass along some costs and raise our price. C, we might drop a little revenue as a result. But overall, right, at the end of the day, you're still a profitable company. All your people are happy and employed. All your clients are very happy because you didn't cut back on the quality, right? You didn't cut back on the value that you add, Tom, right? Your company has a great reputation that adds a huge amount of value for your clients, and they respect that. So that's the one thing you never want to compromise, right? That's the one thing you always want to deliver on.
I think one thing I'd add too is that it's a real partnership with customers, with vendors, and if you've got a good understanding of your data, like Brian was saying, I think it leads to opportunities to go and have conversations about how you can value engineer, whether you need to cut cost on materials or anything you're buying, being able to talk to the vendor and say, what can we do? If we've got good visibility into 80% of our order for the year and can commit to a purchase on the front end, or if we can do an early order and finance a large chunk of that order early in the season, will that help you reduce price? Many times it can. That's a win-win for us and one of our vendors. If you talk to a customer and you really have an understanding about, well, we've traditionally done this as a, we're driving from our branch to the job because you didn't want to carve out any of your on-site facility for a large job for us to set up a satellite or a direct report opportunity. But now with pricing getting pushed and fuel getting pushed, saying, win-win to hold pricing is if you can allow us to direct report there, we could save on fuel and some drive time. That might be an opportunity to, hold price without impacting value.
That's a really good point as far as in your case, warehousing material. I've seen, it's funny, most customers are price sensitive, but some it's just they just love to grind suppliers, right? And they'll complain and complain over a dime or a quarter on the price of a plant, but they'll send an entire crew in a truck to will call 5 plants and, do the math on that type of thing. So that's a really good idea. If you can carve out a little room and have your supplier direct ship your material to your yard, there's a lot of savings. Those are little things that add up. And most of the people on this call know that. I'm looking at attendees, and this is like the who's who in our industry on here. Thank you for showing up today, by the way. But carry on, sorry.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah, I used to work at Lesco on the other side of the table, and I know the people you're talking about, Rick, right? They'd always nickel and dime you on everything they bought. But Tom, you're right? Guys would come in and say, hey, what if I commit to X, right? And we would cut them a special deal because, and so, again, relationships is, we mentioned creativity. Relationships is a big part of this. Don't alienate your vendors because they're raising their costs. It's just what it is today, right? Draw them in closer, right? Make them a part of, a partner in your business and make those numbers visible to them so they understand how they can help.
Understand why. I think that's a question that we forget to ask a lot of times in that scenario is why is this happening? And exactly, Brian, you're saying, how can we approach this from a collaborative standpoint, right?
Yep.
Great. Well, today we've spoken about a lot of the challenges the industry is facing, but it's not all bad. One of the big trends that we've been seeing is actually the rise in demand for landscaping services. So we expect that 22 demand is going to rise and keep going up. So Rick, my first question on this topic is for you. I'm assuming obviously increasing demand directly impacts inventory planning, and seeing that, that increase in demand is still coupled with shortages and labor shortages. How are you managing that rise in demand? And you mentioned a bit of, automation and optimizing the back end of things. I'm really curious how Everday is planning to manage increased demand this year.
Well, that's a good question. On the landscape side, I'll have to be honest, for the most part, we sell on speculation. And that frustrates some of the channels at Everday growers. Retail's much more structured. You know what you're going to sell throughout the year and even when you're going to sell it. Landscape, we do sell on speculation. Now, of course, we have historical data. We know that we're going to sell or believe we'll sell X amount of these varieties every year. And that comes out pretty close. If you start, you can try and react. Where it is difficult for us, as I touched on it earlier, a lot of plants, ferns, certain varieties of natives and new varieties are tissue culture, and the laboratories do that. You have to order it in advance. And even if you order enough, they may not be able to produce and come through. And that's out of my control. Bare root is out of my control. And again, if we don't have propagation rights to a patented item, we have to order our liners and hope that our suppliers respond and provide us. On the side where, and we do a lot of our own propagation, on that side, we anticipate what we're going to need. We're constantly producing liners. I thought it was interesting. I was talking to production because my demand was, I thought, a little low on a plant called Lantana. And the grower there, he goes, I never stop producing lantana liners, Rick. You don't need 50,000 twice a year. You need 10,000 every month. And I said, I didn't realize that. I thought you were producing to the demand H1, H2. And he goes, nope, I'm constantly producing lantana liners. And if you back up, well, it's a lot cheaper to throw a liner away than it is a 1 gallon. So we've gotten pretty good at what we do. And because the different regions are experts in their territories, that helps a lot. Again, we know what we're going to sell to a certain extent. Plus, we do a pretty good job networking with architects and specifiers. So that'll show us where the trends are, what they're putting on the plans. It could be 1 to 3 years out. And then lastly, your salespeople, they know what, they're doing the bids, and a salesperson will always tell you what they're out of and what they don't have enough. So you just have to pull the data in as much as you can through historical data, trends in the specifier and architect business, and then just what you're going to need, what your customers are telling you. I wish it could be a little more scientific.
It'll get there.
It's coming. I was about to say it's coming. Wait a few years and we'll figure it out.
Tom, so I'm curious how Rupert is planning to keep up with increasing demand, considering the shortages, and whether you have some best practices or tips for some of the members of our audience.
I think that it particularly impacts our construction side. And I think what we've been adapting to, we've done in the past and are continuing to do, is really try to mitigate our exposure to price increases. So on the price increase side, it is making sure that our any fixed price exposure is pretty short-lived, and that there are price increase provisions in our contract so that we aren't taking the risk whenever possible on increases, and then really working with producers to make sure that we are connecting between architect to owner to GC through us to producer, to make sure that we have shared expectations of what's available and what it's going to cost throughout the process.
Brian, this year's shaping up to be a big combination of this rising demand and these supply chain challenges. So do you think that that'll be the catalyst to kind of drive the industry towards tech more quickly? Because it seems like a lot of the solutions are tied to better data and tech adoption. What do you think, the role of technology is in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it earlier with being able to get data right out of the system, and Rick, hopefully, and with working with Mike and Shireen is, we're going to be able to maybe provide you with that data, right? Pull the data out of our system and look at what the top, 1,000, 1,500 landscapers are buying as far as materials, how much of it, in what area of the country they're buying it, right? We did a benchmark report last year that provided some great data to companies that use Aspire, that and to other people that aren't on Aspire, just so that we can show people the importance of data. And I think, I think the pandemic was, I don't want to make this sound bad, was good for technology, because it opened people's eyes to the fact that they need to start working. It can't be all bar napkins, and I say that because we're all old and we all used to use bar napkins to do our estimates, but except you, Mike. But
speak for yourself, Brian.
Well, yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. But we did our estimates, just by the seat of our pants, and we had to get face to face with people and talk to people. Well, we had to learn that we maybe couldn't do that in a room. Not that I want to take away from the aspect of meeting people and relationships and that type of thing, but really being able to work in a system so that you can capture data, right? You're not capturing data on that bar napkin or whiteboard or these other pieces of things you're using to run your business, right? But if you're running your business through this technology, right, I can understand my costs, I can understand my margins, I can understand these different areas. And again, purchasing is a big thing that, in my opinion, landscapers do very poorly, right? They don't understand the importance of purchasing well. And I think that's part our fault because we haven't taught them well how to purchase. But I also think, again, we haven't really had good technology in that area either. And so that's coming and that's being introduced more and more every day. And I think people are starting to finally open their eyes and say, hey, I should look at this technology thing, right? I think this is really going to be good for our business.
Yeah, and I failed to mention, thank you for the data you sent me yesterday, Mike. What was the name? And I apologize, I didn't have a chance to look at it this morning. I was on my way to Winters, but I did glance at it. It had a really nice breakdown of the top items you sell. And you can tell by the items what region. And that's the kind of data that we use as well as the specifiers in our historical data. So thank you for that report.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mike, do you have anything to add as it relates to the role of technology or third-party services helping landscape businesses keep up with demand, tied to what Brian was just saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Brian made a lot of good points. And I think that the reality is that the labor shortage piece isn't going anywhere, right? And I think, frankly, it probably will be getting worse, right? So what this means for our businesses, are two main things. You know what I mean? Number one, and first and foremost, right? We need to get amazing at retaining and developing our current talent, right? That's crucial. And then the second, we need to be open to new ways of doing things, right? And leveraging third parties and softwares to streamline our business and outsource some of the tasks and some of the functions, right? Designs, takeoffs, accounting, marketing agencies, recruitment, you name it, right? There's so many options to alleviate some of the pieces that are not a part of our core business. And I look at the example because we talked about this yesterday, actually. We talked about recruitment. So obviously, GoMaterials is growing, we're hiring, like everyone else here today. And I used to be so close-minded with using recruitment agencies or recruitment firms because I was like, they're going to charge 15-20% of their annual salary. It's too expensive. It's not worth it. They won't understand our culture. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it, right? And it's so easy for us to overlook the value of our time, right? And the truth is, right, we all got 24 hours in a day. And I don't know if anyone has more, but again, let me know if you do. So choosing to focus on recruitment as opposed to focusing on improving our core business, right? That's a trade-off, right? That's an opportunity cost to time, right? So I always ask myself, how are we making sure our team is staying focused on our core business to grow? And can we outsource the rest, right? And we have so many customers that do a great job of this, outsourcing design, like I said, takeoffs, and obviously recruitment, and obviously procurement, and really you're seeing them scale faster, right? You're seeing them run more profitable companies, right? So I think that it's all about our mindset to how we are open to the innovation and technology that's coming within our industry.
And I just prior to the webinar, I was telling the group how I'm at North Carolina State, and there's a ton of landscapers from across the country here, and you mentioned recruitment, right? That's what they're here for, right? They're to recruit college students who are here for a national competition. They're recruiting these college students who have a passion for our industry, right? You mentioned growth and development and all of these great things, right? There are people out there that love this industry, right? I know sometimes it feels like they're few and far between, but there are a lot of them out there. We just got to find better ways to getting people, A, passionate about the industry, and B, right, get them into our companies, because I think that can kind of help with that labor shortage in addition to, right, looking for efficiencies through softwares and other means at your company, outsourcing different work that you're doing, those types of things.
It's totally the marriage between your talent and how you're going to help that talent be better at their job through, innovations that are going on in our space. 100%. Yeah.
I think in order to be competitive as a business, in order to find the efficiency to deliver value again, you have to leverage technology and be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. And I think that any business challenge, whether it's pandemic or recession or otherwise, is good for forcing you to rethink how you're approaching things. You're required to in order to survive. And it's been good to, you mentioned some of them, can you outsource takeoffs and reutilize that time? Yes, there's great options for that. Can you leverage technology to find efficiency? And then I think also when you're tackling, labor shortages, if you want to be a competitive employer, particularly, Brian, you're at NCLC right now, you're talking to folks that are digital natives. They grew up with access to everything at their fingertips. So if you're out in the field trying to do a proposal and you can't figure out what a plant costs, I think that reflects badly on an employer. If you want to attract the workforce, if you want to be competitive, you've got to be passionate about leveraging technology to get folks the information they need to do their job effectively, quickly and accurately. So, and while we're not yet Aspire customers, that plug hopefully will be reflected in our pricing in the future.
That will. I noted that, Tom.
Thank you.
So we've discussed a few of the key trends to date, and now I really want to get into, as the final Q&A we wrap up, I want to get into some best practices, some solutions for the audience. So Brian, we discussed how tech, it's going to be a big help for the industry and getting more efficient, but the phrase we all keep using is we need to invest in technology. Technology is so broad, right? And I feel like when a landscape business hears that we need to invest in technology, they're thinking, I don't have the time to research what to invest in. I don't have the resources to actually implement a new technology. I don't even have the budget really to allocate to technology. So which specific tech solutions or problem areas do you think landscape businesses should prioritize to invest in tech so that they actually see the biggest ROI?
Well, I think one of the things, and you guys stated it in the report, is the number of, I think it was somewhere around 86% of the companies just don't understand, right, what technology means to their budget, right, and how to, how to include that in your budget. We've always included, at least for the past probably 20 years, computers, hardware, right, but that whole software thing is kind of this, it's kind of like investing in some sort of web app or something, right? You're kind of like, I can't hold it, I can't touch it, right? What am I investing in, right? And so it's hard for people to really wrap their head around technology, right? They'll spend $60,000 on a pickup truck because guess what? They can get in it, they can drive it down the road, right? This is great, right? We can do all this great stuff with it, and it's productive, but they won't spend $60,000 on their software program, which is like, wait a minute, right? Do you realize the truck is going to depreciate and you're going to have to get a new one? The technology will continue to grow and improve, and you're going to continue to pay a regular price. But if you've included that in your budget, right, you can understand how to capture those costs. And again, I understand it's another cost on that budget line, but again, it's going to create efficiencies. And so you're going to get your return on your investment from that. But if it's not in your budget and you don't appreciate or see the value of the software in your company, then it's going to be more difficult. And I know, there's, the other thing that you guys mentioned in the report is people say they don't have the time to do this, right? How are we going to possibly implement this software into our company? And you're right, it's hard, it takes time. But think about the professional athlete that works all their life to become a professional athlete, right? They don't give up after 6 months and then fail, right? They keep going until they succeed. Software is, when you look at it in that scale, think about a software, really implementing good software into your company as a very short-term pain for a very long-term gain, right? That pain is not that difficult to overcome. We've all dealt with springtime in the landscape industry. It's miserable. We all hate it, right? It's the worst time of year. It's the most fun time of year as far as I'm concerned. But it's, people look at it and go, it's the worst time of year. But we all get through that springtime every year. It's the same with software. knuckle in, have resources. And sometimes we've talked about third-party resources, maybe utilize a third-party resource that's going to help you implement that software, that's going to come in as a project manager to be the person to go to help get the program. Because once it's implemented and you've trained a power user or a sponsor, as we call them, at the company, right? The project person goes away and now you have the software to implement for years and years to come. And so I think there's the different things. Make sure you're budgeting for it. Allocate the time, because again, you're going to see the gain. I guarantee you, we've seen so many companies go from a very low profit companies to very high profit companies. And I worked at a company where that happened, where we went from very low profit to very high profit as a result of technology. I'm not going to take credit for all of it, but we used that system extremely well. We utilized all the tools within it. And in doing so, we were able to generate more business, more profitable business. And of course, then on the bottom line, we were a more profitable company and we could retain employees as a result, right? We weren't looking for labor every year because we were passing that along to our employees. So I hope that answers your question. I like to go on and on, so.
No, it was a great answer. And Mike, as a follow-up, what would be your top recommendation for both landscapers and nurseries to optimize their costs and increase efficiencies this year?
Yeah, so I get the opportunity to meet with, hundreds of landscape contractors and nurseries in a year. So we get to have some really cool conversations about this. And I think really the first step in improving or optimizing anything really comes down to understanding where you are today, right? And understanding, like, okay, where am I today, and where can I possibly go with this, and what can I possibly improve from this point? But if you don't necessarily have that data of that starting point, it's very hard to track improvements afterwards, because you don't really know, you don't have a benchmark to know if it was better or worse or the same. So when you A/B test different solutions, if you don't got a starting point, you don't know how you did on your finishing point, right? And when I look at, specifically for landscapers, right, we know that, in their P&L, the majority of their costs is labor and material. So, labor, are they using softwares? Are they controlling? Are they tracking? Are they gathering that data? How are they doing versus their what they budgeted originally at the beginning of the year versus what they actually spend? And then be able to fine tune where those efficiencies are. And then the material standpoint is working with, many suppliers closely, understanding the true price points that are going on. Leveraging other resources, right, are huge. And even on the nursery side, I would say, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of goes down to the same thing, right? Materials, locking in pricing, avoiding those shortages. And on the labor side, if you can benefit from migrant workers and layering in the automation and tech piece, like, those are probably the key things I would say. So really understand where you are. What are my low hanging fruit, right? And what will have the biggest impact on my business, and how do I attack that with using new innovative solutions?
I think too, the one thing to note with technology is, don't think about it as replacing people.
Yeah.
Think about it as
supporting
giving
them.
people the ability to work smarter and not harder, right? That's what technology does for companies. That's how companies get efficient. That's how companies improve, right? Because again, they can look at data and analyze data. Everyone always thinks, well, great, I got a software program. It's gonna walk out in the yard and tell my crews what to do today. No, that's still not gonna, we're not gonna do that, right? You're still gonna have to send guys out in the yard to tell the crews what to do today, right? So we don't want to replace people, but we want to give them a means to be more productive, just like changing from handing somebody a shovel to a skid loader to plant this tree, right? They're gonna be more productive and more efficient if they got that skid loader with a bucket or a hole digger to get that big bald pine tree in the ground, rather than using a spade shovel.
And those insights are their compass, right? Is what I always say. It helps them make better strategic decisions and go forward in the right direction, right? So it ties exactly to that. Totally.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. And this sounds kind of naive, but you mentioned, don't worry about it replacing people. I've been with this nursery 33 years. The folks, I know the drivers, I know the people in the field, and they're my friends. And a lot of them are families. I used to think, wow, if we automate that function in the nursery, how many people lose their jobs? Nobody, because they're not there anymore. We're losing more people through attrition than we can replace with technology. I mean, we have robots now that'll actually stick the little cuttings into a flat. We've got a machine that we built. It's a one of one. It costs $1.5 million to build it. It literally will take a pallet of plants, separate them, clean the can, prune them. If the quality isn't perfect, it flicks it off the conveyor belt. It goes all the way around. The computer knows what customer it's for, attaches a label, then it goes down all the way down the dock and is automatically sorted to the correct truck. I mean, it's pretty amazing, especially for the nursery business. It cost $1.5 million to build it from 3 European companies because they're very high tech and automated in the nursery business in Europe because everything was always more expensive there. But it's going to replace 80 bodies and the ROI is less than 2 years. So it's kind of win-win. We're more efficient, quality goes up, costs go down, and again, it helps ease some of those labor issues for the bodies that really aren't there.
So we will be planning a field trip to the Verde Farms after this, so we can all witness.
That's what I was telling Mike. And this is the farm where all that equipment is. It's fun to watch.
Rick, don't worry about it. If the robots replace any jobs, we'll hire them. We've got.
Okay.
Send them Tom's way.
Yeah.
Can I say one more thing about labor, and then I'm going to be quiet for the rest of the panel. I've also found that your labor is one of your highest costs, but it's also one of your most important recesses. And treat your employees well. Pay them what they're worth, maybe even a little more, because somebody that wakes up on a Monday and wants to go to work, I mean, that's what you want, right? They're in there, they're productive, they take pride in what they're doing, and it doesn't always have to be more money, although that helps. And then, cut them loose a couple hours on a day, give them their birthday off, take them lunch, bring them back to the yard. You guys know all that kind of stuff, but I do think sometimes we tend to get focused on cost, or maybe it's just the nursery business, and we forget, it's like, oh, I'm already paying you more than you're worth. Not really. I mean, those are important people. Our employees are our most important resource.
Rick, it's a good point, and I was refreshing on the report that GoMaterials printed in advance of this, and one of the stats you guys had was labor force participation rate, which I think you had quoted at 62%. And I couldn't remember when that peaked. I knew it was down. It was down well before the pandemic, and it actually peaked back in 2000, kind of the tech bubble, at 67%. And we've got something, I think you said in there, 10 million job openings currently in the US. That change in participation rate, there are 13 million people that could be working that have chosen not to. They're not participating in the workforce, actively looking for jobs. So to Rick's point, when you're dealing with folks that want to work, treat them well, and that's a key part of the success that we have, and something that we're always focused on at Rupert.
So I want to make sure we have at least 5 minutes left for some Q&A. So I'll end with this last question. In 1 to 3 words max, what for each of you would be your top advice for the year ahead? So I'll start with Mike, and then Mike, you could pass it off. In 1 to 3 words, top advice for the year ahead.
Try new things. Pass it to Brian.
Be creative.
Advice, I'd say be efficient.
People, or focus on your people.
Nice, amazing. Brian, I think I'm going to leave the floor to you. We have a couple questions I can see in the Q&A, and I'm sure people will start typing some in. We have about 5 minutes left, so take it away.
Yeah, this one's sort of specific. On trucking, in the past, the dreaded produce season in Florida always occurs mid to late spring. That ties up trucks and raises prices. What are your thoughts on that this year with the driver shortage and increased fuel pricing? I don't know who wants to take that one first.
Yeah, I can jump in. So we're, I mean, as one of our markets in the U.S. is Florida, we're seeing this with our third-party partners, right? It has been not an easy feat, right? I mean, from a driver standpoint, from a fuel standpoint, going up. So at the end of the day, for us, what we really need to do is be as transparent as possible with what that price point will be, right? Because it kind of goes back to what we talked about before, was that some of these products were quoted and bid on much earlier. So it's taking re-looking at those points and working collaboratively with both the 3PLs as well as our customer to figure out a solution to make sure they're able to get their stuff on time when they need it, and then also on budget.
Anyone else have anything to add?
I just think that's interesting. You said that question was from Florida. In California, here it's tomatoes and then Central Valley beets and broccoli. And it's like 6 weeks, you can't find a truck. They're just running their produce. But I agree. It's just plan ahead and have those relationships with some of your common carrier contract drivers.
Yep.
Okay, Tom or Brian, do you want to add anything? Good. What has the transition been like for you in an industry that once uniquely worked in person or locally to a new generation focused on technology and remote work? Where do you see the most pushback? Maybe Tom, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, you know, rightfully or wrongfully, I don't associate our embrace of technology with working remotely. That hasn't been our experience that much at Rupert, where I really do believe, and as a company, we focused on leveraging technology to drive efficiency everywhere we can. It hasn't resulted in a huge shift to remote work. I think it has enabled work in the field, having software applications that are mobile phone enabled, tablet enabled, getting information that people need out on job sites, allowing them to create estimates in the field, get the information they need to manage crews in the field, access anything to make good business decisions. That's had a major impact. Some things to a small degree that have been very effective, I think mentioned earlier, is the ability to outsource certain things. You know, we've got software development capabilities that we've built out overseas, and we're doing, you know, we've got full-time employees offshore that, you know, we've always worked remotely. We've got, you know, folks that help us with takeoff that are done completely offshore. So a relatively small part of the workforce where we're embracing technology out of the office, but to a very large degree, embracing technology in trucks, out on jobs, in the office to drive success.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, pushback on technology is everyone can probably guess and attest to is, right. I was a person that 20 years ago said, technology, that's a bunch of crap, right? And that was 20 years ago, right? Now I'm like, I'm on board, but, you know, getting with people to help them understand, right, how important technology is. It's really the people that have been in the industry a long time that are pushing back and have a hard time embracing it. Now, showing them how they can work remotely. And as Tom mentioned, I think the younger generation, right, the last thing they want to do is be stuck behind a desk, right? If you tell them they got to go out in the field, do something, and then come back on the desk and put a proposal in, right? They hate that, right? They want to be in their truck, which is great, right? Because where do we want these guys? We want them with their crews. We want them in front of their customers. We want them selling enhancements. We want them out in the field. And if I can put a piece of technology in their hands to help them perform their job well, and we talked about it, right? Be able to look up a cost and a price and something immediately right there when the client asks me, right? That's a win-win for everyone. And so I think technology has brought this idea. And again, I don't think it has to do with remote, like Tom said. It's more getting out of the office where everyone should be, and that is with our customers.
Good point.
Michael or Rick, anything to add?
Good.
No, that was a good point. I would just, here's a takeaway from an old guy. I think you mentioned 20s or that question is I really respect individuals getting in the industry that are aware of and practice life balance. You were talking about 30 years ago, technology, you were a crusty old landscaper or a younger landscaper. Well, kind of same thing. We lived and died. I mean, you could call me at 6 a.m. You can call me at 8 o'clock at night. You still can, and I'm going to answer. But then I resent it sometimes. Or I'll call one of my reps, one of my young millennial reps at 12:30, and he doesn't pick up the phone. He knows it's me. Well, he's at lunch, and and he's going to get it done. Some of them like to work early. They're always there for the customer. Some like to work later. And I've been discussing with my family, my children are all adults, and they're going, you're finally going to get it, maybe too late. So I really like that fresh life balance attitude that our newer employees are bringing on board. Kind of makes me visit my priorities.
Perfect. Well, that is a good note to end on. We're at 1 o'clock here on the East Coast or Eastern time. Shireen, Brian, Tom, Michael, and Rick, thanks so much for your time. It was a great discussion. Reminder to the audience, again, anyone who registered will receive an email either in the next couple of days or early next week with this recording, so you can access it at any time. That concludes the webinar, and everyone have a great day.
Thanks for having me here. I learned a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care.